This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Javia Nicole, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast. As usual, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves so you can see who I have with me today, and then we will get into our conversation.
Awesome. So I am Marla Renee Stewart. I am the owner of Velvet Lips, co-founder of the Sex Down South Conference, and I'm also a lecturer at Clayton State University, and and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Whoop, whoop. Okay, so I'm excited to have Marla on because I actually, when I decided to do the podcast, I kind of had a list of people that I was like, okay, yeah, I want to tap these folks and see if they would be interested in being on. And for Marla specifically, I had like this whole little thing in mind, like, okay, I already know what I want to talk to her about and blah, blah, blah. But before I even reached out, she contacted me on Instagram. So I was like, well, that worked out because I already had like my little list, like, oh, I need to reach out and see if she has time. I just assumed she was too busy. So I'm glad that worked out. But
no, never too busy for you. Come on.
I mean, I know you have a lot on your plate because you do a lot of different things, especially in the community and a lot of education things. So I'm mindful of that, but I'm glad that I am able to have you on because definitely with the work that you do, you have a wealth of knowledge. And so I think it'll be good for the listeners to, of course, just get to know a little bit more about you and about your own personal story and your identity, kind of just like who Marla is, as well as information about Velvet Lips, Sex Down South, and all the things that you have going on. But then I also want to do kind of like this, I guess you can say queer sex and sexuality or queer sex ed type of conversation too, because when I thought about it's something I had been wanting to do, and I'm like, who would be the guest that I would want to discuss that with? And so before diving into all that, I want folks to just get to know a little bit more about you. So what's, some of your background, like where are you from? Kind of how do you identify, those types of things?
So I am originally from California, Northern California, from Sacramento and San Francisco. I went to college in San Francisco, but before college, I actually sort of my queer journey started, in high school, and I was I was 16 and, I had my first boyfriend, and the same year I had my first girlfriend. And it's so funny because I just celebrated my 20th high school year reunion. And I was telling them, I was like, I came out in high school. I was like, not to my friends, but, to my parents. And they had nobody had a clue because, I wasn't out to a whole lot of friends. I was out to maybe two of my closest friends. And pretty funny, I would say. My mom, she was like one of those, I was talking to my quote unquote best friend, right, on the phone. And it was during the time that Ellen was coming out, when she had her own, had her show before her fabulous new show.
Before her current.
Before her current show. So, my mom comes in my room and she's just like, what are you watching? And I was like, I'm watching Ellen. She's like, who are you talking to? I was like, I'm talking to Shannon. She's like, are you gay? And I was like, no, what are you talking about? No. And
oh gosh.
I know. And then like a couple months later, I was like, oh my God, I never lied to my parents, so it was really pretty difficult for me. And I was just like, so 2 months later, I said, remember when you asked me that? And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I was like, you just asked me that like 2 months ago. Like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you tripping?
Yeah.
And so that sort of, and at that time, I just really didn't know what I was, right? Because I was attracted to, I had a couple of attractions to a couple of guy attractions, but I was attracted to women. And so, I just acknowledged that I was attracted to them both. But my mom was just like, oh my God. And she would bring me all these like queer newspapers. And then and then one time, and it's embarrassing, I think, as a 16-year-old, like she brought me like a lesbian sex pamphlet and was like, I don't know what they do, but here, do be safe,
I'm trying to be supportive, which is awesome. But it's like, I would have been, as a teenager, it's like, oh my God, Mom.
Right. Exactly. I was just like, oh my God, why would you do that? But I'm so thankful for her support.
That's actually pretty progressive, though, for Mom to be like, I know I don't know about this, but let me just try to give you resources the best way I can. Like, I'm confused, but I'm trying to help my girl.
Yeah, totally. Right. And I think it stems from her being a teenage mother. Right. So she was just really like, first she was just like, I just don't want you to be pregnant. Right. And so that was hardcore. She didn't want me to be pregnant. And I was like, of course, I get it. So she just really wanted me to be safe in sort of all aspects. But I felt it was really like as I got older, of course, I was just like, I'm thankful that I had a mother like that. Right. Like, I'm thankful that like my mom has been super supportive and really amazing to me. But as far as like my journey into who I am and who I've become, I went to school at San Francisco State. I played college basketball. Before I even had one class, I came out to my team and I was just like, hey, look, I like women. So there's that. And my team was really like, okay, like, and a few of them were like, of course, me too. Like, what are you talking about? So, there was like 10 freshmen on the team. So it was like in 10, sophomore, juniors and seniors. So it was just like a full team, but it was really an amazing experience. And when I was even in school, I studied human sexuality, and just a lot of my, friends would come up to me and be like, Marla, can you give me advice on, I was raped and I have herpes. What do I do now? Or I have, or like, help me figure out this, should I ask this guy out? Or Marla, I need help with this or that. Like people just came to me for like relationship advice and for sex advice. And I was just like, I think this is my calling. It was really organic. And I just have pursued that ever since. I really wanted to help people to learn about like seduction, just be educated, just be more knowledgeable about themselves, about their bodies. And so when I was I was on a college scholarship as well for psychology. So they made us apply to like 80 bajillion grad schools. So I ended up at grad school in Atlanta. And that was, interesting because I was like the only Black queer in the program. So I just got a lot of shit from just, professors, just, I had a lot of like white women professors who were just really on my ass. Like just, it was actually a really horrible experience.
That doesn't sound fun.
Yeah. And I ended up getting my master's, but while I was doing my my PhD work, I did my comprehensive exams, and they were like, oh, this is the highest grade we've ever seen since 1976. Like, okay. You are amazing. And it was like, however, like your dissertation would be probably the best thing you'll ever do in your life. So maybe you should dumb it down. That's basically what they told me in this like almost phenomenal letter. Yeah. And so I was like, wow. I was like, you think my dissertation is the best thing that I'm going to do in my life? Like, fuck you guys, right? Like, this is crazy. Yeah.
What kind of shit is that to say?
Right. So I ended up doing my PhD work, ended up, working on my dissertation. And then they ended up changing the rules for white people and in my program. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And so I ended up leaving. So I have a PhD education, but no PhD. So that's the shitty part of it. But, I still want to do it. And maybe there's just another program that's out there for me that I just haven't bumped into yet, or, and then I'm also doing a whole shit ton of other things too that I feel good about. So with my business, I started that while I was in grad school. So I think that's, 9.5 years now since I started Velvet Lips, and been, helping people with, their sexuality issues, problems. And I often try to cater to queer folks. I've often done speed dating or whatever, but it's so interesting. I mostly cater to straight people because there's just I don't know if queer folks have the money to pay me, or I don't know, or maybe they just feel like they are already blessed in that area. And at the same time, I have worked with queer therapists who have all queer clients and have done programs with them. But as far as my personal clients goes, it's always straight people. So,
is there anything about kind of just the progression, I guess you can say, of Velvet Lips from the time that you started it and kind of what you envisioned for it at that time versus where it is now? Is there anything that has surprised you, or what has that looked like? Because has anything changed from what you envisioned for it when you started it?
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of things have changed. And I think it's just been a progression over time. It sort of ebbs and flows, and what is good? I started a podcast and I did this and I did that. And I just realized they're just, it moves. It has to move with what's going on at the time, right? So 9 years ago, we weren't doing a whole lot of live streaming or, through the internet and things like that. And just because the internet is so central to the work right now, I think I have to now again transition into moving into something different. But, I did podcasts. I did see clients every now and again, not as much as I do now. I did a lot of workshops. I was hired actually at a lot of universities and, nonprofit organizations or different, companies, churches even. So I really just decided that I'm going to move with whatever I'm moving with, whatever it is that is happening at the moment, I'm going to just go with it. So I think now I'm going to move into sort of videos, live streaming, things like that, but also do my in-person workshops because, people really enjoy those too.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Really kind of just adapting with the times, really, especially after almost a decade of having a business that's been successful in an area where I don't know if it will be more difficult it's already difficult to have a business anyway, but to just be able to kind of stay with the times and continue to be successul, to me is a big deal. And then especially as a Black woman business owner, to me, I think is a big deal. So when did Sex Down South start?
So Sex Down South started we had our first conference in 2015, which means we started 2014. We did a survey, figured out, I did some mentorship with Marianne Adams to figure out what should I do? Yeah. I was just asking her a bunch of questions and I was how do I put on a conference? This is what, Tia and I want to do. And she just really gave me some really great insight. So we put out a survey and say what do you want in a conference? And people, filled out the survey. They gave us some phenomenal answers and how much they would pay to go to this conference. The people gave us what we're actually producing, which is actually amazing because we've blown up so much. It's I think our first year we had about 250 people. Our second year we had 350. We had to cancel our hotel event last year, but we did a sex ATL thing, sort of TED Talk style. Right. And then this year, of course, we're on again, and we're expecting about 450 people this year. So
when is it this year? Because it's coming up. It's
September 6th right? through the 8th. Yeah. And we're actually doing a couple of pre-cons too. One is a Tuesday and Wednesday is going to be a POC-centered sexual attitude reassessment that Bianca Loriano is doing. And then we also have a desire mapping on Wednesday, which is going to be an all-day event as well. And I did desire mapping at the Creating Change conference. I don't know if you're familiar with that, queer conference that travels. But creating change, they always have the desire mapping, and it was really phenomenal. There was like 200 people though at that one. Yeah.
So what is desire mapping?
So desire mapping is sort of like thinking about where your desires are coming from and maybe where they have been rooted, you know. And so I talked about like my experience of being with a porn star and how that sort of has really kind of shaped my sexuality over time. And so it's just thinking about like, why do you desire these things? And for me, I really realized that I really like the element of surprise, right? Like I really love like when somebody does something new and different and like, I don't know what's coming. And so for me, it's shaped my desire of just like being surprised or being in awe or being shocked about what somebody can do to me sexually. I
had never heard the term desire mapping, but once you described it, I mean, it's definitely something that I've done and that I do kind of periodically, just kind of going over, you know, it's like, hey, what makes me tick? What am I interested in? What and why? Because I'm very curious and very like just a nerd. So I try to kind of get to the bottom of, okay, well, if I'm into this thing, why? Like, why is it that you're into this? What is it that you like about it? Because I am very assertive and dominant and those kind of things. So I look at how my experiences have shaped just what my inclinations are in terms of the things that I enjoy. And it's just so interesting to me as I try to like connect those dots because there's some things when I was younger, I would kind of like reject, like I would recognize something about myself and I'm like, I don't know if I like that, you know, like it was really kind of like some shame ultimately is what it boiled down to, like some type of shame or me kind of judging myself for being into whatever it was. And I'm just like, okay, why? At this point now, I'm just like, I don't judge myself because I'm like, I'm grown. I'm going to do what I do. But at the time, I don't know. It's just as I discover more about myself, some stuff I was like, I don't know if I'm okay with it. And I had to really kind of interrogate that and figure out why, like what would be, like, why wouldn't I be okay if I'm not like out here, you know, harming people or something? Why wouldn't I be okay with it? Is it because I'm concerned about what other people think or, you know what? So I had to kind of get to the bottom of that. But I think
that's amazing that you can do that yourself, I must say, because a lot of people can't. And so more props to you to like actually think about it. And I mean, it's probably because you said you are a nerd, you know, it's probably one of those things that like a lot of people just don't even think about those things. And so that's where I come in to help them think about it. Yeah.
Right. Because it's like if there's things you never even considered, I think for me, part of it is just like I'm a researcher at heart, so I like to research everything, including like my own internal stuff. But part of it is just that psychology and the counseling like background. So I kind of, before really looking at other people, I really did a lot of like analysis of myself. But yeah, a lot of it people don't even really think about. I don't even think it's a matter of like, hey, I'm avoiding this. It's just it never crossed their minds. So to be able to come to you and have you really like open their minds in that way, I'm sure it's just really profound for folks as they start to discover more about themselves, just things they never even considered.
Yes, for sure. Yes, agreed.
So for you, was there anything for you when you did like the desire mapping? Did anything surprise you?
You know, it was nice because it was just like we meditated on some things. I actually was surprised at one particular thing because, you know, in our society, we're really thinking about how, you know, women are objectified. And as I was meditating and thinking about even myself, I realized that I treated myself as an object, right? Like I've been so sort of colonized in the mind that like I have had an issue just realizing that like I need to decolonize my mind because I am also treating myself as an object instead of myself as a subject or as a person of agency. So, and like I am here for everybody else's enjoyment, you know? That was pretty tough, right? To like realize.
That's a hard, one of those hard truths. when you have to, I mean, because I had to come to one of those kind of realizations. It was actually after going through like some relationships and going through one particularly toxic one. And then I just remember kind of looking at myself. I felt like I was on the outside looking in at myself instead of kind of being in myself. Probably sounds weird as hell, but and I just was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, you are so focused on this other person and other people that you really have put yourself in this role of what can you do for them? Without having that for yourself. So, I mean, I definitely believe in being a vessel and helping people. That's what I want to do. So that's why I chose the field I chose, but you have to pour into yourself too. And I was not doing that. I just wasn't. I just didn't even, I don't know, to an extent, I didn't even consider it. So I'm like, okay, so you're just looking at yourself as like this thing to do for other people or to be something for other people. And then where does that leave you? It left me feeling like I had nothing for myself and feeling like I was just like, who am I? Like I had lost myself and had to kind of figure that out. So it was a very hard truth.
Yeah. But and even thinking about that though, like that is ingrained in our DNA, right? Like going back to like slavery times, we have been, as Black women, we have been here for other people rather than ourselves. Absolutely. So what's interesting about that is, Black women, of course, we've been, for other people and thinking about slavery times. And when I was talking to this neuroscientist, she was like, it's actually ingrained in our DNA. Like the reason why there's a lot of overweight people is because we were starving, during the Depression or whatever, right? And like our bodies, DNA is like, hey, you've been starved before, so you need to go ahead and like stock up,
that's that starvation mode. It adapted. Our bodies adapted.
Exactly. And so, the same thing with, us as Black women and thinking about slavery and how we were, used for other people. And that to realize that is just like, like it's probably in our DNA. It's something we actually have to actively combat because we're just used to being, not putting ourselves second instead of first.
Right. If even second. Right. I mean, we have to really, it does take a lot of work to reject that because so much of our worth, like so much of our, what we've been told our self-worth should be invested in revolves around what we can do for other people, revolves around, okay, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're a teacher, you're this, you're that. And that is your significance. Like your significance is what you can do to improve other people's lives, not what you can do for yourself. And then if we do things that are for ourselves, then it's like, oh, you're selfish, and it's looked at as this as a very negative thing. So to be able to reject that is definitely, a form of resistance, but it's really, really hard when you have all these things working against you, telling you that you should be doing otherwise. And that definitely does play out in our sexuality. If we look at just kind of expressing or not expressing what our desires are and what we need for our needs to be met. And we are told like, okay, well, your body is really just like to be used for someone else's, not even someone else's, but specifically a man's pleasure. And your pleasure does not, your pleasure is like incircumstantial. Like if you get some pleasure, fine, but that's not the goal. That's not like the point. It doesn't really matter. But if you just so happen to, then it's like, okay, cool. It's like a byproduct. So, it's ingrained in us to like, you please your man and, how to keep them interested. And I mean, all that type of stuff is tailored toward women. They don't really tailor toward men, like how to keep your woman, interested in. They do stuff like in women's magazines where they're like, this is how you spice it up and make sure that you do the same things to keep them that you did to get them and keep yourself up. And that men are not told that. They're not told like, hey, dress up for your woman or try these new things for her or, do something to help her relax and set the mood. No, like it's just like they don't have that responsibility. Everything is catered to them. So it's just really, it doesn't surprise me that so many women are, either repressed or just unaware of like, hey, what are the things that I actually am even interested in? What gets me off? What turns me on? What would actually please me when you haven't even had some type of format or like some type of framework or anything to explore that?
Yeah, that's like right on point, actually, because I get a lot of clients and a lot of women who are just like, I actually don't even know what I desire. Like, I went and saw this lesbian couple, and they were, one of them was just like, I don't even know what I like. Like, I'm just sort of here, and it was just like, what? Like, how do you not know what you like? Yeah, it's very shocking. And because, I'm like the complete opposite. I'm like, oh, I'm going to tell you what I like,
Let me give you the list.
Okay.
That's devastating to hear, honestly. I was on another episode, I was talking to, I don't remember who I was talking to, but we were just talking about like, how folks engage with each other. And I was saying that it really made me sad that in a lot of my experiences with women, like I'll ask my partner, I'm like, what do you like? Like, just you tell me what you like. Instead of me, I'm not going to assume that I know like, oh yeah, I'm just, I got all this prowess. I know exactly what to do. Like, no, you tell me what you enjoy, and let's kind of cultivate this together. And then maybe there'll be some new stuff that I might spring something on you, but I want that foundation to be what your likes are. And just in the interactions I've had with women, that is so not the norm. So that when I ask, they're either like, no one's ever asked me, or if they tell me, and that's what I actually do. Like, I've literally had a woman tell me, wow, you did exactly what I said I liked. And I was like, well, yeah, like you're sharing your body with me. Like, I'm not going to just be like, I'm about to just run off on this tangent and do what the fuck I want to do. When you told me like, yeah, you said this is what you like. I'm like, okay, girl, this what's gonna happen.
Right.
And literally was like, just looking at me like, she was like, no one has actually ever done that. And I was just like, what? I mean, it really saddened me. It was really devastating to me because these are the experiences that women have been subjected to, really, where it's just like people are just kind of acting on their body and not like with them. It's just all bad. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I agree totally. It's sad, like you said, but people are selfish too, like people want to do what they want to do,
right. But that's
like, I enjoy this with your body, so let me do that.
Right. It's like what you were talking about with the objectifying. It really is that person as an object as opposed to a subject, like, oh, well, this person is like a recipient of my affection, my attention, my whatever. It's like, no, they're really just like this thing I'm using, which is just I get where it comes from. It's still ridiculous to me. And then when I think about kind of just how I feel about women, it's really hard for me to fathom engaging with a woman in that way. Like, it's just so hard for me to be like, knowing that I adore women, like knowing that I'm just like, what? That doesn't compute. I can't imagine like treating a woman that way. But of course, that's not typical, especially with engaging with men, or even not men, but when that's the framework that we have, when it's like, that's how we're used to functioning. And that's all we have to go off of. Yeah. Unless they come into contact with, someone like you who is doing some type of education that goes against that, then it's like, that's all they know. And that's what really saddens me.
Yeah, agreed. I'm with you 100%.
If you look back and you have like your 16-year-old self versus now, did you have any type of, let's say, like, did you envision like, okay, I've come out and kind of just looking ahead to your future, did you have some type of vision about the type of woman that you wanted to be or the type of things you wanted to do? Or is there something like, I would tell my 16-year-old self, it's kind of a cliche question, but I'm still curious because coming from, I came out, this is kind of what the response was, this is kind of my journey, to now, is it something that you imagined being in a place that's similar to this, or are you just like totally surprised by, the woman that you are now?
Oh my gosh. So before I was 16, I had one of those, like, I'm going to be a housewife, with 2.5 kids, married. Yeah.
The housewife that is like secretly teaching the other housewives about like all the little like sexy kinky stuff.
So like I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. I had no like desire to go to college. I had no like, even though like I was an academic, really, essentially, like I was like in all AP classes, like, I was a Mesa student. Like I had Mesa awards up the yin yang. Like I just had I just had a desire to be a freaking housewife. And then like once I realized I like women, like everything was just off the table. Like everything was just like, oh shit, like, I don't even know, what does this life look like? You know, like, I had been socialized to think that this is the way, you know, my life should be. I should be married to a guy, white picket fence, 2.5 kids and a dog, and, you know, and that's my life. And then after, like, once I don't know, woke up out of the freaking whatever nightmare I was in, I realized, like, oh my God, like, no, that's not the life that I want, right? Like, I actually, like, I want to do stuff. I want to travel. I want to, you know, like,
I don't want to just be
experience the world. Like, there's so many different kinds of people. And I think because I was in a small town, like, I grew up, you know, going to Center Elementary, Center Junior High, and Center High School, right? Like, all of, you know, it was a small town.
Wow.
A lot of the people that I'd grown up with, I'd grown up since elementary school. Like, so my life just changed completely, right? Once I came out. So I really feel that, like, I don't know, like, now, I think I was hoping, and after I came out, I think I was hoping that, like, I would have a boo, like, in my 20s, you know, like my permanent, I still held on to that, to the belief of, you know, long-term relationship, you know, like, married in your 20s, like, I still held on to that. And in this queer world, like, that shit is rare if it happens at all, you know, like, and then realizing that, like, oh, wait a minute, like, this is not actually.
Or it happens, but it's like because if we're looking at like queer relationships, but we're still using a hetero, like a cishet framework. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of times it does happen, but there's just differences. Like, a lot of times, like, when you look at what is considered a successful, like, long-term relationship, especially like a hetero relationship, a lot of it's predicated on the very specific gender roles. Not even that all straight people, like, really adhere to those, but the framework, like the framework that is ingrained into us, it relies on these very specific gender roles and these very specific, like, roles that are assigned to masculinity and femininity and all this kind of stuff. So when we are in a queer relationship, we're like, well, in reality, this framework doesn't fit us. We still a lot of times try to squeeze into it or try to, like, fit ourselves into it by saying, oh, well, if this person's more masculine, they should do this. And if this person's more feminine, they should do this. But the reality is it was not, that framework wasn't made for us. So it doesn't fit. So then these problems arise, you know, with trying to utilize this.
Yeah. So it's interesting, though, too. Like, I actually had to reclaim that for myself, right? Like, so we, you know, like when you said, like, oh, like, it wasn't made for us. And at the same time, it's like, I love the spectrum of femininity and masculinity, right? Like, I only date masculine people, right? Like, I really had to be like, okay, even though I'm queer and, you know, as an aggressive femme, right? Like, people tell me all the time, they're like, Marla, you're such a dude, right? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I guess, because I love women and I want to be around them, like, all the time and, like, you know, touch and feel on them. Yes. So you call me a dude, that's fine. But, like
if that makes me a dude, fine.
I know, right? Like, I get what you're saying, but I think you just don't realize, like, women can do that too. Right? Like, women can also be aggressive and women can want women as much as men want women. And I'm also feminine and that feels good to me, right? Like, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't have to be super masculine or I don't have to, but I just really had to reclaim those gender roles for myself because it's even though it's like, yes, that's what we were taught. It's like, oh no, but I actually like it, you know, like it's different when you get to actually kind of like claim it for yourself as opposed to it just being like put on you. Like, this is just your only option. Gotcha.
You know, have that agency and you, because I mean, that was the reason for a long time I rejected the label femme. I rejected it. I was just like, but it was just because of what I was accustomed to kind of being associated with it. Because like now I'm like, I will say I'm femme, but before I just was like, I rejected it because I felt like, okay, if I say that I am femme, that means that I have to kind of dumb down or like water down any of my masculinity, and I have a lot of it. And so I felt like it put me in a box that I wasn't comfortable being in, but I had to kind of like unpack it because I had to figure out what that was coming from and unpack that and then reclaim it. But I didn't know initially. So initially I was just like, I'm not a femme, I'm just me, or just whatever. I just was like, don't call me a femme. I mean, I don't want to be called a stud or anything either. But I was just like, don't call me. I just really, really rejected it because of my assertiveness and my aggressiveness and all that kind of stuff. It seemed like it didn't fit. And so I had to learn that, hey, like these things still fit. You can be femme and still be assertive. You can be femme and still have masculinity. Like you can run the spectrum. You can be a tomboy and still be femme. You can be, as me and my wife would say, like you can be zaddy and still be femme. Like you can be all these things and still be femme and still, embrace, because I felt this need to like reject the femme label and really kind of hold on very tightly to my masculinity. And I had to realize that stemmed back to like when I was younger and just kind of, I always knew I liked girls, always knew, but I felt like because of these specific gender roles that like in order to be like, when I was little, I wanted to be a little boy because I felt like I had to be a little boy to be with a little girl. That was my reasoning, because I'm like, well, that's how, if I want a girlfriend, I got to be a boy. If I want a wife, I got to be a husband, like, that kind of thing. And I always knew that I wanted like, a girl or a woman or whatever. So I was like, oh, so I guess that means, I want to be a little boy. And I was already like tomboyish and stuff. So that was my thing. So I feel like as I got older, I was really holding on to that because I felt like I needed the masculinity in a way to kind of validate me engaging with someone who was feminine. Because I mean, my wife is more masculine center, but I like the spectrum femme. I don't care. I just like women. But I really held on to that. I really held on to it, and I was just like. I rejected femme because I had experienced a lot of erasure with femme, like being in a femme identity and like engaging with women. So really, it's like I held on to masculinity and rejected the femme label because of visibility. I felt more visible, more valid in my queerness. But yeah, it took some time. Now I'm just like, look, whatever. I am who I am. So it's different now. But at the time, it was just like after already being in this place of feeling very just not feeling seen, I was kind of like holding on to things that made me feel visible and valid. And then I had to realize like, hey, you don't need, like, you can be all these things. You can be femme and be visible and valid and all those kind of things.
Yes. And like, and we can embrace like all the labels, right? Like some people think like just because you're a tomboy that you can't be femme. Like, no, like those things can go together. But what you think of a tomboy is me. And then what you think of a femme is also me. Like, and what, whatever those things are all me, And it's funny because like, we have conversations around like labels, right? Like people are like, don't label me. And I'm just like, but labels can be so empowering. Like as much as people think that labels can be disempowering. Exactly, right? It's just like, just label yourself all the things. Like it's okay. Like whatever you feel like, just label whatever else you think may be contradicting that. It's fine if you feel like it belongs to you, But
I had to understand that because I did feel like, and we are kind of taught that it is either or. And so I thought it was either or. Like, okay, if I accept this femme label, that means that if I accept this femme label, that means I'm like walking away from the masculinity. And I did think it had to be either or. And now, I mean, I know that it doesn't have to be, but that's what we're taught. So a lot of people, they don't know. I mean, they don't consider that it can be, all, or it can be multiple. It doesn't have to be either or. We get to curate it for ourselves, like what actually fits you. Some of those things may seem contradictory, but we're nuanced people. So we can have these things coexisting. But that is still, even in 2018, still a pretty radical like frame of mind. And so it's something that we're still adjusting. People are still kind of like learning. Yeah, I agree. Like we are still learning, and it's a process, it really is. All right. So I definitely want to thank you for being willing to come on the podcast and talk with me and let my listeners get to know a little bit more about you. I learned some things about you, so I thought that was pretty cool, and just learned some new things in general. So we are going to have another, I guess, part you can say to our conversation. So make sure that you also tune into that. But yeah, I just really want to thank you for being on. Is there anything that you want to add or want to plug? Feel free. Shameless plugs. I'm all. So is there anything
yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being on your show. And, I think you're absolutely amazing and wonderful. So I really, I'm glad to be here. As far as like social media, if you want to follow me personally, it's just at one Marla Stewart. And my company is at Velvet Lips ATL and at Sex Down South ATL or SDS Con on Instagram. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, thank you again.
Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javi and Nicole and produced and edited by Charmaine Johnson. Music is by Young Carts. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Black Rad Queer. That's BLK RAD QWR. And you can also listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to stay connected to us in our discussion group. It's called the BRQ Discussion Group on Facebook, where we will continue the conversations that we start in the podcast. So I have created the first official Black Radical Queer merchandise item, and it is a bomb black on black t-shirt. So make sure you head over to Teespring and check it out, cop it, rock it, send me photos so I can post on the Instagram. Because I think the shirt is pretty dope. I hope you all like it. I'll include a link to the Teespring in the show notes so you can go cop the shirt. Thank you so much for supporting Black Radical Queer Podcast.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.